Laura Bosma, Pretty Penny Pre-Cuts, and your Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum, our Fall Stitch Along 2020. This is Midnight Pumpkin. We're on step 7, and so now we're getting to the stitching part. So we'll first go with the blanket stitch on the pumpkin and the stem, and I'll show you how to begin, how to end, and how to start again. Here's the finished project, and again, blanket stitch was used for the perimeter of the stem and these portions of the pumpkin. Note that I did change the stem different from what you saw in your, when we inventoried the kit. I decided I liked this one better. It'll be in your kit with a little note that says use whichever one makes you most happy. They'll both be in there. I preferred this larger one. So here's the one that I'm working on, again, same color of deep teal, and this just happens to be a flannel, and again, I'm keeping mine in a rectangular shape to make a pillow. You'll need these two floss colors, the orange and the brown. They're fabulous with this particular kit, and those are the ones that you would prepare in 3 strands. So that you can see what I'm doing, though, I'm going to use the yellow gold thread that's in your kit. When I go off camera, I end up peeling it off or taking it out and then restitching it. So in a future videos, you'll see it stitched correctly. But for right now, so that you can see it, I'm going to go ahead and stitch in a different color. So I'm going to just lift the work up, and I'm going to go from the back to the front. I usually kind of pick a spot at about maybe 7 o'clock, which is, you know, roughly here-ish. Maybe it's here. And I'm going to come up from the back. I'm going to leave my knot on the back of the work, and I'm going to come up from the back, and I'm going to pull my thread all the way through. So I'm going to pull the thread all the way through. I can see that the knot has nestled against the work on the back side, on the wrong side, and I'm ready to go. And so with the blanket stitch, if you're right-handed, you actually work the stitch counterclockwise. If you're left-handed, you work the stitch clockwise. You'll know it's stitching correctly if it does what it's supposed to be, and that is that you have a perimeter edge of the thread, what I call the leading thread, and it lays smoothly along the edge or the perimeter of what you happen to be stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and go in. Again, this is a tiny little pointy place, and I want to make sure that's secure. I'm going to go, I'm going to split the difference. So the difference between this side and this side, about 1/8 of an inch away, is about 1/8 of an inch deep. So my stitches are going to change size a little bit as I go. I'm going to go through the work. Again, I'm going through 3 layers. Wool stem, wool sepal, flannel. So, you know, you may need to push a little bit. Don't push it through your hand. And then I'm going to try and go in and back up right at the perimeter of the work. And each time for the blanket stitch, again, I'm working counterclockwise here. When I go through the work to the back and back up, I'm doing a complete stitch. I'm not going all the way to the back and then all the way to the front. I'm trying to do it as one stitch. Each time, my needle is going to virtually come up inside a circle, basically. This thread here is a circle, and my needle needs to come up through it. Not to the right or left side of it, but through the middle of it. And that's what catches the thread. Now I need to pull it tight enough that this little leading edge is going to be on the perimeter of the brown, but not so tight that it pulls into the work. So it's a happy medium there. Sometimes if you get it too tight, you use the blunt end of your needle and just kind of pick up this leading edge just a little bit and just coax a little bit of space, a little bit of, undo a little bit of your tension there. And then I'm going to make my next stitch. Now, as I get into larger portions of this stem, my stitches are going to change size a little bit. In the end, though, I don't want my stitches to be too much bigger than 1/4 of an inch in and 1/4 of an inch over. We can't do that right yet. So right now, while I'm in a narrow portion, I'm just looking at where's the middle distance between here and here. So I'm going to come in, or a little short of middle. Again, my stitches are probably still at about 1/8 of an inch. Now, technically, you don't have to go all the way to the flannel portions. You can go through enough that you've stitched the brown to the green. That's good enough for right now. Because what's going to hold this on completely is when we get up here, you're going to stitch the brown to the background teal, and it will all be held in time. So again, I come up inside the circle, see that I'm inside the circle, again pulling it tight enough that this leading edge stays against the edge of the brown, but not so tight that it flips into the center. And then I'm going to make my next stitch. Now some people are really good at doing these super tiny. Other people, you know, like the distance inside the work into the brown to be shorter than the distance across the perimeter of the stem. My stitches tend to be the same. The leg, I'm calling this a leg, the portion that goes in, is probably about the same length as the leading stitch that I've got here on the edge. Let me go ahead and take a third stitch. So let's make believe that you have run out of thread. Leave yourself at least 2 or 3 inches. Don't stitch it down so tiny that you can't tie a knot with it. So you just have to imagine I've only got about 3 inches left. I want to secure this stitch, so I have to be really sure that I go back to the back to tie my knot outside. I need to be on the opposite side, in this case on the right side of what I call this blanket stitch leg. So I'm going to come right against the perimeter of the brown. I'm going to be on the outside or the opposite side of where that leg is, and I'm just going to pull it tight. That acts as a securing stitch. It basically disappears. This can't come undone as long as I knot it on the back. So I'm going to turn it to the back. And you can see some of my stitches came all the way through and some of them didn't. That's good enough. I'm going to take a bite, that's what I call it. 2 or 3 threads of flannel is what, or wool is what you're going to pick up here. So my thread is here, my bite is right there. I'm going to pull, pull, pull until I have a circle that's probably about 1/2 inch, maybe a tiny bit smaller, and I'm going to put my needle back through that, and I'm going to pull tight. Some of you might do that 2 or 3 times. Again, we're working on fusible. What I do is tie 1 knot, and then I just send my needle between the first 2 layers that I can feel, and I just, you know, drag that over a little bit, and then this is where I would cut the thread, and then I would simply start again. Now, how do I start again? Well, what I would do, I'm going to change to the brown thread here. What I would do is, from the back to the front, I want to come up inside this. So I want to be in the corner of the most recent blanket stitch and leg. So I'm going to come up inside that corner as close as I can. I recommend that you do not split stitches, meaning don't come up through the thread, come up through the flannel and the wool. And then I'm going to pull that. And it's going to basically cover up the little tie off that we did. So again, you can see here's my brown knot right here. Here's my finish right there with the yellow. I'm going to pull that tight so it's against the work. And then I'm just going to keep on going. Now you're going to see that it matches. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to toggle up. I'm coming inside the circle. And I'm going to continue. This one's going to be harder to see because it matches. I do tend to use threads that are close in color. I like variegated threads because they change over time and add interest, but I often don't stitch in a super contrasting thread. The reason for that is I kind of save that for crazy quilt work, and then secondarily, it really shows. So if you're not really loving your stitches, they're going to hide a whole lot less when there's a super amount of contrast. And again, we use this yellow so that we can see. So I hope that helps you with the blanket stitch. We started, we ended, and we started again. And you're going to do the perimeter of the stem and then all the exposed perimeter pieces of the pumpkin, both inside the pumpkin and outside the pumpkin. So when I come back to you, I'll have all that stitched and we'll move on from there. Happy stitching, Laura Bosma, Pretty Penny Pre-Cuts, and the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. Our fall stitch along project, Midnight Pumpkin.